president instead of, a president being, he has to run again.
Give corporations so much power.
Right, because they can elect the people that will put them, that'll be for their corporation. If it's an oil corporation or electric corporation, they can steer, what we need or what we don't need in their direction, even if it isn't good for the United States.
And more than they already do.
Yes. What is your feeling about that?
I'm with them where it's a scary thought to find that corporations could have more control than they already do. I mean, there's already been instances where they've limited individuals and the PAC groups and everything, but corporations are really a scary thought just by how big they can be. And especially, I know we talked about, because we're not sure if they could be foreign investors or not as well. So you could have like an oil company in the Middle East influencing Republican candidates who may be all for the oil.
Or Democratic
Exactly.
candidates, too. We can't just say Republicans. It could be independents, it could be Democrats, because you never know who's really into the oil. Just because somebody says they're a Democrat and they say, oh, it's the Republican Party, that's always the oil people. But there are a lot of people that are in the Democratic Party, too. They're kind of silent. They don't want to know. They don't want to let anybody know that they're in for oil. And you're correct. You're absolutely correct. They could be influencing some Saudi Arabia or company, and because they want to keep that oil going. They could probably find enough in the Gulf right now. They could skim it and they could use it. But I understand. What about the limit, the term limits? Even for the president. What is your feelings on that too?
I'm really all for the term limits. Sorry.
No, please.
I
had nothing to say.
I think just you can see as we get these people in Congress where they've been there for 20, 25 years, everything begins to be all about re-election. It's hard to feel comfortable, especially if this is your first term, comfortable enough to make a substantial law if you're afraid that you're going to get elected out. So it's really just a matter of people start to coast and do things that are going to be just agreeable to the most center amount of people rather than doing what they really believe is right.
Although it's really only a small fraction of legislators who are there for 20, 30 years. On average, I saw a statistic that said about every 10 years or so, something like 85% of the Congress is refreshed. Just because people lose elections, and there are good years and bad years, and even though there is an advantage to incumbency, sometimes that doesn't help. I mean, look at the Congress right now going into the 2010 midterms. There are going to be scores of incumbents who are going to be voted out of office.
So people are getting tired of the same old. How do you feel about it, Steve?
I'm open to all kinds of campaign reform, but I think that the best system to make sure that we have a good system of elections is more involvement by voters. Like if you look at the 2010 primary here in Illinois, you had about 20% of eligible registered voters go out to the polls and vote. I mean, you can't expect your officials to be accountable if you're not holding them accountable. And the best way to do that is to go out, to know about the issues, and to vote.
And one of the things that we also talked about was, the open primary, that our governor is all for the open primary. And one of the problems that we have right now, and I myself had put in I think it was 1998, I'm trying to think, 2008, sorry, I'm in the 1900s. Thinking about, I'm still a dinosaur. In 2008, I put an advisor referendum and won over 80% of the vote in Moraine Township that they're all in favor of open primary. And one of the things that I think it's very important, because a lot of people don't go to primaries primarily because they have to declare themselves either a Republican or a Democrat. Once you take the ballot, it becomes public record. And a lot of people don't vote in primaries because of that very thing. And you just mentioned something, that we need to get the vote out. But if people are afraid to voice their opinion, and primaries are so important because they are responsible for the people that, you know, without that, you're not going to get the right people in office. And if you get a bunch of people, there's about, I think it was 70 or 80%. I know that I saw an article in the newspaper. Actually, my brother-in-law wrote it, who's an alderman in Springfield. He wrote that there's so many people. He says more than there's like 4 out of 5 Illinois voters that express their will for an open primary, and he's also providing that so many people are not voting because they're afraid to lose their jobs. You know, people that are appointed by either the Democrats or appointed by the Republicans, and they find out that you voted for somebody that's not in your party, their jobs a lot of times are eliminated.
If you're fired because of that, that's not legal.
Yeah, I know it isn't legal, but things, you know, you guys are, you know, you have a different ideological, you know, way of viewing life, but that's life, and in the hard times that people do that. And you said something that you made an interesting statement.
Right. Well, I mean, an open primary is definitely something which we should be considering. I know that it would encourage a lot more people to vote. My dad, for instance, always tells me he's never voted in a primary before, ever. He doesn't like the idea of declaring party, not so much because of work-related issues, but just purely ideologically, I guess. He doesn't want to commit to a party. He's an independent voter, nothing like me. But he would definitely be more encouraged to go out there and vote if there was an open primary and he didn't have to choose a party. So if there are people out there, and I know there are, we should do whatever we can to open up the system to get more people having a say in who represents them and what happens in the world.
And isn't one of the reasons that and Democrats in particular want to preserve the current system? It makes it easier to identify the voters, and isn't that one of the reasons they want to
Well,
keep
that's both parties.
Not the open primary, but they want to keep well they right for this year especially they want to keep the current system, not the open primary. Is that something that?
You'd have to ask the Democratic strategy. You're a Republican. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Never been like a high level.
Are you for the open primary?
I don't know how I feel about it. Honestly, I'd like to learn more about it. Part of the reason I'm conflicted is I don't understand why necessarily our system needs to change because there are people who are choosing not to vote.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that changing the system is going to make them vote. I think to some extent there are people who don't like to vote, and they find an excuse. And the other thing is that primaries are not general elections. Primaries do not exist to figure out what the will of the people is and then elect a representative to reflect that will. That's not the purpose of a primary election. The purpose of a primary election is for any political party to be able to choose its candidate, to put that candidate up for general election to be the representative of the people.
But that candidate's very important to people, because if you don't vote, you're going to get a candidate that you don't like, and then people complain about it after
then
the
they
fact.
should vote.
And so they should vote, but they really feel uncomfortable taking a ballot, because a lot of people who are independents, especially, who split their vote, and I have to say that's me. I am definitely an independent because I do vote. I'm not a party girl. I always say that on my show, and I always split my vote. And it's very uncomfortable to go in, and it becomes public record. What is your feeling about that here?
I'm a little conflicted as well as David. I mean, I'm sure there has to be a better way. I know I was an election judge, and this past election, just having to say your party outright in front of everyone else, sure, that's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially if you're in front of your neighbors or colleagues. But I think there's also some value to being a member of a party and choosing your own candidates. Well, I'm certainly not as knowledgeable as I could be about this. I think there must be a better way to make people a little more comfortable.
But it's also it's been used as a means for enforcing political patronage for public employees, and that is bad too. The checking type of thing. It's almost like Big Brother's watching you, and that's my feeling
So wouldn't
about
it be easier just to make the records of what primary you voted in private? Isn't that an easier solution than changing the entire nature of our system?
Well, we'll leave that question because I guess I have to make a wrap on this program.
You're black. Show's over. Good show.
Oh, I didn't get to, I didn't.